The night was quiet when the first explosion shook the palace walls. Queen stood at her window, watching the stars of her empire spread across the dark sky. She was young for a ruler, only in her third cycle of leadership. Her skin was pale blue like all the people, and her silver eyes reflected the distant lights of the capital city below. She had been thinking about peace, about the future, about how her people might finally know an era without war. Then the ground trembled, and fire bloomed in the eastern courtyard. Turned from the window as alarms began to scream through the palace corridors. Red lights flashed along the walls. She could hear shouting from somewhere below, voices filled with panic and fear. Her personal guard, a tall named, burst through the door. His armor was already damaged, burn marks across his chest plate. His 4 eyes were wide with terror. "My queen," he gasped, "the rebels have breached the outer walls. They are inside the palace." Felt her heart's beat faster. There were always threats to her rule. Small groups who wanted the old ways back, who believed her reforms made the empire weak. But they had never been bold enough to attack the palace itself. "How many?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. "Hundreds, maybe more. They came through the service tunnels. Our defense systems failed." Looked at the floor. "My queen, I cannot stay." Stared at him. "What?" "The other guards are already leaving. The Eastern Battalion has surrendered. The Western Guards are fleeing through the gardens." Took a step back toward the door. "This fight is lost. I am sorry." Before could speak, before she could command him to stay, turned and ran. His footsteps echoed down the corridor until they faded into nothing. Stood alone in her chambers. The sounds of battle grew closer. She could hear weapons firing, people screaming, walls crumbling. Her empire was falling around her, and every soldier she had trusted was running away. She moved to her desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a small energy pistol, a gift from her father before he died. She had never fired it. She had never needed to, but she picked it up now and held it in her shaking hands. The door to her chambers opened again. Raised the pistol, ready to fire at whatever rebel soldier had found her. But the figure in the doorway was not a rebel. He was human, one of the few in the palace. He had been hired 8 months ago as an extra guard, though many of her advisors had questioned the decision. Humans were strange creatures, they said, too emotional, too unpredictable. They came from a small planet on the edge of known space, and they had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. They were primitive by galactic standards, but had proven himself useful. He was quiet and did his job without complaint. He was not as strong as a guard, not as fast, not as tall, but there was something in his eyes that made people nervous, a hardness that never went away. He stood in the doorway now, wearing simple combat armor. A blade hung at his side, and he held a rifle in his hands. There was blood on his face, but could not tell if it was his own. "Your Majesty," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "We need to move." Lowered her pistol slightly. "The guards have fled, all of them." "I know. The palace is falling." "I know." Waited for him to say more, to explain that he was also leaving, to apologize and run like all the others, but just stood there, watching her with those strange human eyes. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Tilted his head as if the question confused him. "You hired me to protect you." "The contract means nothing now. The empire is collapsing. There is no payment waiting for you, no reward. If you stay, you will die." "Probably," agreed. Felt frustration rise in her chest. She did not understand this creature. Every instinct should be telling him to run. Self-preservation was the most basic law of nature. Every species in the galaxy understood it. "Then why?" she demanded. Was quiet for a moment. Outside, another explosion shook the palace. Dust fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. They could hear footsteps now, many footsteps coming closer through the corridors. "Where I come from," said slowly, "we have a word, duty. It means something different to humans than it does to other species. It is not about payment or reward. It is not about survival. He checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded. When a human gives their word, they keep it, even if it kills them, especially if it kills them. Shook her head. That is foolish. Yes, said, humans are very foolish. He stepped into the room and moved to the window. He looked down at the courtyard below, at the fires burning and the soldiers fighting. His face showed no fear, no excitement, just focus. There are at least 50 rebels between us and the safe room, he said. The main corridors are blocked. We will have to go through the servant passages. The servant passages are narrow, said, easy to trap us. Also easy to defend. One person can hold a narrow passage against many. Turned to look at her. Stay behind me. Do not run unless I tell you to run. Do not stop unless I tell you to stop. Do you understand? Was not used to being given orders. She was the queen of an empire that spanned 100 star systems. Billions of people called her ruler. And here was this small, weak human telling her what to do. But she nodded, moved to the door and looked out into the corridor. The sounds of battle were very close now. Could see shadows moving at the far end of the hall, rebel soldiers searching room by room. When I move, you move, said quietly. Stay close. Then he stepped out into the corridor, and the queen of the empire followed the human into the darkness. Behind them, the throne room doors burst open. Rebel soldiers poured in, weapons raised, ready to capture their prize. But the room was empty. The queen was gone. And somewhere in the palace, a single human was keeping a promise that everyone else had broken. The servant passages were dark and filled with dust. Had never walked these halls before. She had never needed to. Servants came and went through these hidden corridors, bringing food and cleaning supplies, always invisible to the royal family. Now these forgotten paths were the only thing keeping her alive. Moved ahead of her, his footsteps almost silent on the stone floor. Did not understand how such a heavy creature could move so quietly. Humans were supposed to be clumsy and loud. That was what her advisors had told her, but moved like a shadow, checking each corner before waving her forward. They had been walking for several minutes when suddenly stopped. He raised one hand and froze behind him. She listened but heard nothing except her own breathing. 3 of them whispered, around the next corner 20 meters. His eyes could see in the dark better than human eyes. She looked past and saw nothing. How do you know? I can smell them. Blinked, humans can smell that well. No, but fear has a strong scent. Everyone has it tonight. Pulled his blade from his belt. It was a simple weapon, metal forged on Earth. Nothing compared to the energy weapons they used. Stay here. Do not make any sound. Before could protest, was gone. He disappeared around the corner without making a single noise. Pressed herself against the wall, her hearts pounding so hard she could hear them in her ears. For a few seconds there was silence. Then she heard a short cry quickly cut off. A thump, another thump, the sound of something heavy falling to the ground. Appeared around the corner again. His blade was wet with purple blood. Clear, move. Followed him past the corner and saw 3 rebel soldiers lying on the ground. 2 of them were dead. The third was still breathing but would not wake for hours. Had not killed him. Why spare that one? Asked. He was young, probably forced to join. Wiped his blade on his sleeve and kept walking. Killing should not be easy. The moment it becomes easy, you lose something you cannot get back. They continued through the passages. Found herself watching more carefully now. She had always thought of humans as simple creatures. They lived short lives, less than 100 years usually. They had no special abilities, no natural weapons, no armor or shields. They could not see in the dark or hear radio waves or survive in vacuum like some species could. But did not move like a weak creature. He moved like something dangerous. You are different from what I expected, said quietly as they walked. Did not look back. How so? My advisors told me humans were soft, emotional, quick to panic. We are, said. Most of us anyway, but panic and emotion are not weakness. They are fuel. Fuel. When humans are scared, we can do things that should be impossible. When we are angry, we become stronger. When we love something, we will destroy anything that threatens it. Paused at another corner, listening. Other species see our emotions as a flaw. We see them as our greatest weapon. They moved on. The sounds of battle were growing distant now. The rebels were still focused on the main palace areas, searching for the queen. They had not thought to check the servant passages. But their luck would not last forever. Suddenly grabbed and pulled her into a small storage room. He pressed his hand over her mouth and held her against the wall. His first instinct was to fight, but something in his eyes told her to be still. Footsteps passed by the door, many footsteps, a whole squad of rebels moving through the passages. They waited in the darkness, not breathing, not moving. The footsteps grew louder, then softer, then faded away. Still, did not release her. He waited another full minute before finally letting go. Sorry, he said, could not take the risk. Rubbed her mouth. You are very strong for your size. Humans are denser than we look. Our planet has strong gravity. We evolved to be heavy. Check the corridor again. Clear. They moved on. After another 10 minutes of walking, they reached a larger chamber. This was where the servants ate their meals and rested between shifts. It was empty now, everyone having fled when the attack began. Motioned for to wait while he searched the room. We can rest here for a moment, he said. The safe room is still far. You need water. Wanted to argue that she was fine, but her body disagreed. She had not realized how thirsty she was. Found a container of water and handed it to her. She drank deeply while he stood by the door, watching for danger. May I ask you something? Said when she had finished drinking. Yes. Why did you leave Earth? Why come to the stars? Was quiet for a long moment, thought he might not answer. Then he spoke, his voice softer than before. I had nothing left there. My family died in a war, my home was destroyed. I had no reason to stay. He kept his eyes on the door. When the first alien ships came to Earth, everyone was scared. But I saw an opportunity, a chance to be someone new, to have a purpose again. And that purpose is guarding people. Protecting people, corrected. There is a difference. A guard watches, a protector acts. I have seen too much death to stand by and watch more. Thought about this. In her culture, soldiers were trained to serve the empire. They were loyal to the system, not to individuals. If the system fell, the soldiers were free to leave. There was no dishonor in retreat if the cause was already lost. But did not think that way. To him, a promise was a promise, regardless of the circumstances. It was a strange kind of honor, almost foolish. And yet, sitting here in this dark room, surrounded by enemies, it was the only thing keeping her alive. Tell me about Earth, said. What is it like? Smiled slightly. It was the first time had seen him smile. It is blue, blue water covering most of the surface. We have one moon very large in the sky. The air smells sweet after rain. His smile faded. It can be cruel too. We have wars, disasters, injustice, but we also have hope, always hope. No matter how bad things get, humans believe tomorrow can be better. That sounds naive. It is, but naive is not the same as wrong. Was about to respond when his expression changed. He held up his hand for silence. His eyes moved to the ceiling. What is it? Whispered. They found our trail. They are searching the passages systematically now. Moved to the door. We need to go now. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, almost hot compared to her cool skin. He pulled her through the door and they started running. Behind them could hear shouts. The rebels had found the bodies of the guards had killed. They knew the queen was in the passages now. They knew she was not alone. The hunt had truly begun. Ran faster, pulling along. She was taller than him with longer legs, but she struggled to keep up. Humans were not fast runners over short distances, but they did not get tired like other species. Their bodies were designed for endurance, for long hunts that lasted hours or even days. And was just getting started. "The safe room is 3 levels down," he said as they ran. "There is a stairway ahead. Once we reach it, we seal the door behind us. And if they break through—" Looked at her, his eyes hard and determined. "Then I hold the stairs until you reach safety." Saw no fear in his face, no doubt, only the calm certainty of someone who had already accepted death and found peace with it. She did not understand humans. She was beginning to think she never would. But she was very, very grateful there was one beside her tonight. They reached the stairway, but it was not empty. 4 rebel soldiers stood guard at the entrance, their weapons pointed at the corridor. They saw and at the same moment saw them. Everything happened very fast. Pushed to the side, throwing her behind a support pillar. At the same time, he raised his rifle and fired twice. 2 soldiers fell before they could react. The other 2 opened fire and bright energy bolts filled the air. Dove behind another pillar. Stone exploded around him as the rebels kept shooting. He waited for a pause, then leaned out and fired again. A 3rd soldier dropped. The 4th rebel was smarter. He stayed behind cover, calling for backup into his communicator. "The Queen is here. Sector 7, the main stairway. Send everyone." Knew they had only seconds before more soldiers arrived. He pulled a small device from his belt, a grenade he had taken from one of the dead guards earlier. He threw it around the corner. The explosion of light and sound was terrible even from behind the pillar. Covered her sensitive eyes, crying out in pain. The rebel soldier screamed as the flash burned his vision. Moved before the light had fully faded. He crossed the distance in 3 steps and brought his blade down. The 4th soldier fell. "Come," said, reaching for, "can you see?" Barely. Her silver eyes were watering, struggling to adjust. "That weapon is cruel." "War is cruel. We need to move." He pulled her through the stairway door and sealed it behind them. The lock was strong, designed to withstand attacks. It would not hold forever, but it would slow the rebels down. The stairs went down into darkness. Emergency lights glowed along the walls, casting everything in dim red. Held onto his arm as they descended, her vision still recovering. "How much further?" she asked. 2 more levels. The safe room has its own power supply, thick walls, and a direct line to the emergency beacon. Once we activate it, help will come." If there is anyone left to answer. Did not respond. Knew he was thinking the same thing. The rebellion might have spread further than the palace. The military might be compromised. Help might not exist anymore. But they had to try. They were halfway down the 2nd level when the door above them exploded. The rebels had breached the stairway faster than expected. Heard shouting, footsteps, weapons charging. "Run," said. Ran. Her legs carried her down the stairs as fast as they could move. Behind her, she heard rifle firing again and again. She heard bodies falling. She heard screaming. But she did not look back. She reached the bottom of the stairs and found another door. It was sealed with a security code. Her hands trembled as she entered the number she had memorized long ago, the code known only to the royal family. The door opened. She turned and saw still on the stairs, 10 steps above her. 5 rebel soldiers were coming down toward him, firing their weapons. Moved between the shots like water, his body bending and twisting in ways that should have been impossible. He fired back, and 2 more rebels fell. But there were always more behind them. Shouted, "The door is open." He did not answer. He was too focused on the fight. A rebel soldier got close enough to swing at him with a blade, blocked the strike with his arm and heard bone crack. He did not even flinch. His other hand drove his own blade into the soldier's chest. 3 more rebels charged down the stairs. Shot one, kicked another down the steps, and caught the third by the throat. He held the struggling soldier for a moment, then threw him into the others coming behind. "Go inside," shouted Et. "Seal the door." "Not without you." "I will follow, go." Hesitated. Every part of her wanted to obey, to save herself, to let this strange human die so she could live. That was what her training told her to do. That was what any sensible ruler would do. But she could not move. Fought his way down 3 more steps. Blood was running from a wound on his head now. His left arm hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. But he kept fighting. He kept killing. A rebel soldier shot him in the leg. Stumbled, fell to one knee. More shots hit the wall around him. He raised his rifle and returned fire, killing the shooter. Another rebel came at him with a blade. Caught the blade with his bare hand, letting it cut deep into his palm. He pulled the rebel close and headbutted him so hard the soldier's helmet cracked. The rebel fell, unconscious or dead. "Why will you not die?" one of the rebels screamed from above. Looked up at them. His face was covered in blood, some purple, some red. His body was broken in multiple places. Any other creature would have fallen long ago. But he smiled. "Because I am not finished yet," he said. He pushed himself up from the stairs. His broken leg dragged behind him, but he did not stop. He moved down another step, then another. The rebels kept shooting, and he kept walking. Realized she was seeing something that would become legend. Something that would be told for generations across the galaxy. A single human, broken and bleeding, refusing to fall. Reached the bottom of the stairs. He stumbled through the door and finally pulled him inside. She sealed the door behind them. The thick metal closed with a heavy sound. Locks engaged, energy shields activated. The rebels on the other side started pounding on the door, but it held firm. Collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the floor. His breathing was heavy and wet. Could see at least 5 wounds on his body, maybe more. His left arm was useless. His right hand was cut nearly to the bone. Blood was pooling beneath him. "We made it," he said quietly. Knelt beside him. Her hands were shaking. She had seen death before, had ordered soldiers into battle, had made decisions that cost lives. But she had never watched someone destroy themselves to protect her. "You are dying," she said. Probably, closed his eyes. "The beacon, you need to activate it." Looked around the safe room. It was small but well equipped. A control panel sat on the far wall, emergency supplies were stacked nearby, and a medical kit was mounted beside the door. She grabbed the medical kit and brought it too. "No time," he said. "Beacon first." "You first." "That is the first time you have used my name," she said. Her voice was firm now, commanding. "And it will not be the last. Stay alive, that is an order from your queen." Opened his eyes and looked at her. For a moment, something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Respect. Something deeper that neither of them had words for. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said. Opened the medical kit and started treating his wounds. Her hands moved quickly, applying bandages, injecting painkillers, sealing cuts with medical foam. She was not a healer, but all royalty received basic medical training. The beacon reminded her between gasps of pain. "After, if the rebels find another way in, then we will deal with it." Finished wrapping his arm and moved to his leg wound. "I will not let you die, not after everything you have done." The pounding on the door continued. The rebels were trying everything now, explosives, cutting tools, energy weapons. But the safe room held. It would hold for hours, maybe days. Time enough for help to come. Time enough for it to keep her first real promise. She would save this human, the same way he had saved her. And when dawn came, when this night of fire and blood was finally over, she would make sure the entire galaxy knew what happened here. The queen and the human, alone against an army. and refusing to fall. The night stretched on forever. Finished treating wounds as best she could. The medical kit was not meant for human biology, but the basics were similar enough. Stop the bleeding, clean the wounds, reduce the pain. She had done what she could. The rest was up to him. She activated the emergency beacon. A bright light began flashing on the control panel, sending a distress signal across every channel. If anyone in the Empire was still loyal, they would see it. They would come. But did not know how long that would take. She sat down beside her, back against the wall. The sounds of the rebels outside had grown quieter. They were still trying to break through, but they seemed to have realized it would take time. Time they might not have. "Tell me about your family," said. His eyes were half closed, his face pale from blood loss, but he was still breathing, still fighting. "My mother was a teacher," he said slowly. "She taught history to young children. My father was a soldier. He died when I was 12. In a war." "Yes, one of many on Earth. Humans fight each other almost as much as we fight everyone else." A weak smile crossed his face. "My mother always said that was our greatest flaw, our violence, but she also said it was our greatest strength." "I do not understand." "Neither do I sometimes," shifted slightly, wincing at the pain in his leg. "She believed that violence was not evil by itself. What mattered was what you used it for, protecting the weak, fighting injustice, standing against cruelty." Thought about her own culture. There had been warriors once thousands of years ago, but they had evolved past that. They had built systems, laws, governments that made violence unnecessary. They were civilized now, advanced. And yet when danger came, their soldiers fled. "My guards were trained for decades," said quietly. "They had the best equipment, the best weapons, the best armor, but they ran." "Training is not the same as will," said. "You can teach someone to fight. You cannot teach them to care." "Do you care?" Looked at her. His dark eyes, so strange to her, held a warmth she had not expected. "I did not at first. You were just a job, a contract, money for survival." "And now?" "Now," he paused, gathering his thoughts. "Now I have seen who you are, how you stayed calm when everything fell apart, how you treated my wounds before activating the beacon, how you asked about my mother." Felt something shift inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "You are not what I expected either," continued. "You could be like other rulers, cold, calculating, treating people as tools, but you are not." "I try not to be." "That is enough," closed his eyes again. "That is more than enough." They sat in silence for a while. The rebels outside continued their work, the sounds of cutting and drilling echoing through the thick walls. But inside the safe room there was peace. Checked the beacon's display. Still no response. Hours had passed and no one had answered. She tried not to think about what that meant. "Tell me a human story," she said. Opened his eyes. "What kind of story?" "Any kind, something from your world." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he began to speak, his voice soft but steady. "Long ago on Earth there was a kingdom at war. The king had many soldiers, thousands of them, but when the enemy attacked, most of them fled. The battle seemed lost." Listened, recognizing the echo of their own situation. "But there was a bridge," continued. "A narrow bridge that the enemy had to cross to reach the kingdom's heart, and one soldier decided to hold it. Just one. Just one. His name was lost to history. Nobody knows who he was, but he stood on that bridge alone and he fought." His voice grew stronger as he told the story, as if the words themselves were giving him strength. "The enemy came in waves, dozens at a time, but the bridge was narrow. Only a few could face him at once, and he killed them all. For hours he held that bridge. His body was covered in wounds. His weapons broke and he picked up new ones. He should have died 100 times, but he did not." "What happened to him?" "Eventually he fell. His body gave out. But by then the kingdom had time to prepare its defenses. They won the war because one soldier refused to give up. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She had not cried since she was a child. Queens were not supposed to cry. "Is that a true story?" she asked. "Parts of it. Humans tell many stories like that. Some are true, some are not, but they all carry the same message." "What message?" Looked at her, and despite his pain, despite his broken body, he smiled. "One person can change everything." A loud crash came from outside the door. The rebels were making progress. Checked the readings on the control panel. The door's shields were weakening. They would not hold much longer. "They are breaking through," she said. Tried to stand. His legs would not support him. He fell back against the wall, groaning in pain. "Help me up," he said. "You cannot fight anymore." "Then I will stand in their way. Maybe that will be enough." Felt anger rise in her chest. "No, you have done enough, more than enough." "It is not about enough." Grabbed her arm, his grip still surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. If they break through, you run. There is an emergency tunnel in the back of the room behind the supply cabinet. It leads to the outside. I will not leave you. You are the queen. Your life matters more than mine." "Do not tell me what matters," his voice echoed in the small room. She was shaking now, her composure finally breaking. "You saved my life. You bled for me. You refused to abandon me when everyone else did. And now you want me to abandon you." Stared at her, surprised by her outburst. "I am the queen," continued, her voice cracking. "And I decide what matters. And you matter, do you understand? You matter to me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the rebels faded into the background. The whole universe seemed to shrink down to this small room and the two people inside it. "No one has ever said that to me before," whispered. "Then remember it." Wiped her eyes and picked up his rifle from the floor. Her hands were steady now. "I do not know how to use this properly, but if they break through, I will learn fast. We stand together or we fall together. That is my decision. That is my order." She looked at him, her silver eyes hard with determination. "Is that understood?" Stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Yes, my queen." Another crash. The door was beginning to buckle. Emergency alarms started flashing as the shields failed one by one. Helped to his feet. He leaned against her, his broken body somehow still standing. They faced the door together, weapons raised. "If we die," said, "I want you to know something." "What?" "I am glad I stayed." Felt her heart swell. Fear, pride, love, hope, all of it mixed together into something she could not name. "I am glad you stayed too," she said. The door began to crack. And somewhere in the distance, heard something else. Ships coming closer. Help had finally arrived. The sound of ships grew louder. Heard explosions from above, not inside the palace but outside. Heavy weapons, the kind mounted on military vessels. The rebels heard it too. The pounding on the safe room door suddenly stopped. Then chaos erupted. Through the walls could hear shouting, running footsteps, energy blasts. The rebels were under attack. The loyalist forces had arrived. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. Knelt beside him, keeping the rifle aimed at the door. The battle above them raged on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then silence. A voice came through the safe room's communication system. "Your Majesty, this is Admiral of the Third Fleet. The palace has been secured. Are you alive?" Reached for the control panel and activated the speaker. "I am alive. I am in the safe room, level 3. We are coming to you now. Do not open the door until you hear the code phrase." "Understood." Set down the rifle and returned to his side. He was barely conscious now, his breathing shallow and uneven. The makeshift bandages she had applied were soaked with blood. He had lost too much. "Help is here," she said softly. You did it, you kept me alive until help came. His eyes opened slightly. A faint smile crossed his pale lips. Told you, humans are stubborn. You are more than stubborn. Took his hand in hers. It was cold, too cold for a human. You are something I have never seen before. Footsteps approached the door. A voice called out the code phrase, the secret words known only to the highest levels of the Empire. The code, and unlocked the door. Imperial soldiers poured into the room, their weapons raised and ready. Behind them came Admiral, a tall woman with scars across her face and hard eyes that softened when she saw the Queen. Your Majesty, bowed deeply. We came as fast as we could. The rebels had blocked our communication channels. It took hours to break through. I survived, said, because of him. She pointed to, still lying on the floor. The soldiers looked at the broken human with confusion. They did not understand what they were seeing. A small, weak creature from a primitive world, covered in blood and barely breathing. But understood. She had been a soldier long enough to recognize courage when she saw it. Get the medical team, she ordered, now. Medics rushed into the room, carrying equipment far more advanced than the simple first aid kit had used. They surrounded, scanning his body, injecting medicines, attaching devices to monitor his failing heart. Multiple fractures, one medic reported. Severe blood loss, organ damage, burns to the respiratory system. Will he live? Asked. The medic hesitated. I do not know, Your Majesty. This level of injury would kill most species, but humans, the medic shook his head. I have never treated a human before. I do not know what they can survive. Watched as they lifted onto a stretcher and carried him out of the safe room. She followed, ignoring the protests of her guards who wanted to take her somewhere safe. The palace was ruined. Fires still burned in some areas, and bodies littered the corridors. Rebel soldiers in chains were being led away by Imperial troops. The smell of smoke and death hung heavy in the air. But the sun was rising. Through a broken window, could see the first light of dawn spreading across the sky. The night was finally over. The Empire still stood. Because one human had refused to let it fall. 3 days later, stood at the entrance to the medical wing of the Imperial Hospital. Was inside, still unconscious. The doctors said he had died twice on the operating table. Both times his heart had started again. They called it a miracle, called it stubbornness. She entered the room quietly, lay in a bed surrounded by machines, tubes connecting him to devices that were keeping him alive. His face was peaceful, almost young without the hard look he usually wore. Sat down beside him and took his hand. The rebellion has been crushed, she said softly. The traitors have been arrested. The Empire is safe. She paused. Thanks to you. She looked at his face, at the strange features that had become so familiar over these past days. I have been thinking about what you said, about duty, about keeping promises even when it costs everything. She squeezed his hand gently. I made a promise to my people when I became queen, a promise to protect them, to serve them, to put their needs above my own. But I never really understood what that meant. Not until I saw you on those stairs, bleeding and broken, refusing to fall. Tears fell from her silver eyes. You taught me something. You taught me that words are nothing without action. That promises mean nothing if you abandon them when things get hard. She wiped her eyes with her free hand. I will be a better queen because of you. My people will have a better future because one human showed me what leadership really means. She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his hand. It was an old gesture of respect, usually reserved for the greatest heroes. Wake up, that is an order from your queen. Days turned into weeks. Visited every day, reading reports beside his bed, talking to him about the rebuilding efforts, about the new laws she was passing, about the future she was trying to build. And one morning, when the sun was bright and the sky was clear, opened his eyes. Was there as she always was. She saw his eyes flutter, saw consciousness return. She jumped from her chair and grabbed his hand. He looked at her, confusion in his eyes at first, then recognition, then something warmer. "Your Majesty," his voice was rough, barely a whisper. "Did we win?" Laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, we won." He tried to sit up, then groaned and fell back. "How long?" 3 weeks, you died twice. She held his hand. "Do not do that again." "I will try to remember." He looked around the room, at the machines and the flowers and the window showing the city skyline. What happens now? Thought about all the things she had planned to say. The speeches she had prepared, the honor she wanted to give him, the positions she wanted to offer. But looking at him now, weak and tired and human, she realized that none of that mattered. "Now," she said, "you rest, and when you are better, we will figure out the rest together." Looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the same smile she had seen in the darkness of the servant passages, the same smile that had never shown fear. "Together sounds good," he said. A year later, the story of that night had spread across the galaxy. The tale of the human guard who did not run, who stood alone against an army, who almost died to save a queen from a species he barely knew. Other species watched the recordings from the palace security systems. They saw fighting on the stairs, broken and bleeding. They heard him say, "I am not finished yet." They watched him refuse to die until his duty was done. And they began to understand something that they had learned that night. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest or the most advanced. They could not see in the dark or survive in space or live for thousands of years. But they had something else, something that could not be measured or studied or replicated. They had heart. And when a human gave their word, the galaxy itself would have to break before that promise was abandoned. Queen ruled for many decades after that night. She was remembered as one of the greatest leaders in history. But whenever she was asked about her reign, she always returned to the same story. The night when all the guards fled, when the palace burned and the empire nearly fell. And the one human who stayed. She kept his sword in her throne room, mounted on the wall behind her seat. A simple metal blade from a primitive world, worth nothing to most people. Worth everything to her. And every morning, when she sat down to lead her people, she looked at that sword and remembered the lesson it taught her. One person can change everything. If they refuse to give up.